Always remember, the opinion you follow should be your own. Just consider the things stated here to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online.
I got to talk. I got to tell what I feel. I got to talk about my life as I see it.
Hey, what's up, Mike?
How's it going, Phil? I mean, another day, another podcast. Shout out to everybody out there that's continuing to follow along each week. We're super thankful for all of our listeners. And today we don't really have a plan, I don't think. So, and that's the way we like to be. So we got a lot to talk about, a lot in the news. And Phil, what do you got for me first?
Well, the first thing I want to talk about is the biggest news out there, and that's the Unitedhealthcare CEO Brian Thompson being assassinated in New York, and they've already captured, or they think they've captured the alleged assassin.
Yep.
What's your raw thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about here, right? So, I mean, for one, to see something happen like that in broad daylight, basically in the middle of New York City, when I first saw it, it looked like a hit, right? I mean, it looked like just a hit. And then you started realizing that, well, there was a bunch of stuff that was done that wasn't super professional about it. So probably wasn't a professional hit guy. And then, of course, the assumption is, and we could talk about this more at length, but the assumption was that our healthcare system in the United States is broken. And the assumption is that here's somebody likely that was pissed off. They had a family member, they had somebody that was treated poorly by the system, that probably died, whatever. And that's kind of what you gather. And then, a couple days later, we find out that indeed the guy that did the hit was none of the above. Was right. I mean, so it wasn't a professional. He was not somebody that was, let's just say, had a grievance against the healthcare system because of a personal family member or something like that. And then, as it turns out, which, by the way, is something else we could talk about. There was a whole, I watch a lot of TikTok and social media and stuff, and you saw a bunch of people like that almost were like happy that a CEO. Yeah. Like, what in the actual fuck is wrong with people? So, they're like, oh, here's a wealthy guy, the rich guys that make a lot of money in healthcare. They're screwing everybody, blah, 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 which, by the way, may all be true. But as it turns out, the guy that did the assassination comes from a family that's wealthier than the guy that he killed. Super wealthy family, well educated, educated in Ivy League school. Not the profile that any one of us was expecting.
Well, it depends upon how you look at the crime. If you're looking at him as a Robin Hood, I don't think it discounts where he's from. The deed is the deed. So if you're looking at the deed as something good and moral, then it doesn't matter where he's from. The irony of it is only that from what they're saying early on, he had a interaction with the healthcare because of a back problem and some healthcare that he had related to it.
Yeah,
but he's obviously in a bracket where even if they turned him completely down for everything, he was going to be all right.
Yeah.
So,
and here's the additional irony to that, Phil, is that his family runs healthcare facilities.
That's crazy. Yeah, nurseries.
Yeah, which by the way make money off of the healthcare system and a lot of this insurance, because they make more money from the insurance companies than they do if it's on a private pay. So,
well, he's kind of typical of what I am seeing with this generation, and that is they may have grown up in a middle class neighborhood, maybe not as well off as him, but they didn't have any problems. There was food in the refrigerator. There's 2 cars. There's a garage. Education is okay. And instead of them learning what their parents went through to get all of that, they generally become spoiled and take on very liberal leaning ideas. I experienced that myself, having a daughter growing up in a upper middle class neighborhood, and she really had no worries, and nobody in the neighborhood really has worries. And when that happens, they start to being involved in social issues a lot more than usual. And I think that's the occurrence. Sometimes they feel guilty for their successes or their family's success or wealth or whatever. So I think it might be a combination of his experiences, his family's connection to it, and then just the age group, him growing up, the schools he went to, the liberal learning that he's had. I think it's a combination of all that stuff together.
But what you're feeling on, I was a little shocked that I saw so many memes and so many posts on social media that, I mean, just about blatantly supported it.
Well, there's a famous comedian who talked about a famous murder. I think it was about the OJ thing. And he said that I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't recommend anybody doing it, but I understand. And I think that is the overwhelming tone. And I understand whether that's my actual feelings or not. It's kind of amazing to me that people are mystified that a majority of people have taken this side. We've talked about the economy. The average person has experienced or knows someone. There's like maybe 3 degrees of separation with people in knowing of someone who has went into debt because of health care, lost someone because they couldn't get a claim or whatever. So it is far easier to empathize with what happened. I mean, what happened to the CEO than to empathize with the CEO.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It's, I guess where my issue is like, you know, 2 things. One, obviously, it's not ever justifiable that you assassinate somebody from behind like you did. Second,
agreed.
You know, it's not to think that it's going to accomplish anything is insane.
Well, I forgot, bro. One of the major insurance companies a couple of days later had an emergency meeting and decided to look over all claims.
Yeah, I saw a little bit about that. But on the other side of that, there are also a couple of major insurance companies announced that they're going to increase the security significantly with all of their executives. Which, by the way, I don't, you know, obviously cost money. Therefore, the insurance is going to cost even more. So, you know, I don't know. That's a backfire scenario there, of course. But you know, I don't know. That the whole thing is interesting, and it proves that. Well, I mean, you and I have talked about this on the podcast before. Obviously, the healthcare system in the United States is extremely broken. Extremely broken, and I don't know how you solve that, but clearly, you know, a lot of that is, you know, originates in the government and the government rules and the government system. And our system is broken. The insurance companies, by and large, are taking advantage of that, right? I mean, we talked about the whole thing with everything has to do with money, right? You know, we talked about the whole pandemic and the drugs that were involved in the treatment of COVID and whatnot, and you know, whether or not they were really effective, whether or not they're really vaccines, whether none of that really is where I'm going with this. The point of the whole thing was it had everything to do with the money involved for big companies like Pfizer and all these drug companies, and nothing really to do with reality. Because we can look at that from a hindsight perspective 3-4 years down the road here, wherever we are today, and say, geez, half the stuff that they told us is complete and total bullshit. I mean,
so where do you sit? How do you feel about the crime?
Well, I mean, I would never support that. I mean, I don't think that's ever going to solve any problems. I usually, I mean, the fact that he wasn't a hit guy means somebody else didn't pay him to do it. He did it on his own accord. Then that leads you to, is this a mental illness problem? One would argue that to go through this whole process and do what he did, it's got to be something. He's got to be a little off his rocker, right? I mean, normal people, I'd like to believe anyways, generally don't do this. I don't know. I mean, more of this, to me, I need more of the story. I feel like I'm missing something. I feel like this guy didn't have that much reason.
So, Mike, I'll never condone someone taking somebody's, never.
Right.
Never. But somehow people are kind of glossing over. Like, just because you wear a shirt and tie, nobody's qualifying what he does as being a murderer. People are just totally making it like, I mean, he has murdered. He literally has at least thousands and thousands of people's lives that he's a murderer.
And that's the other side of the equation, because the system itself is obviously killing people. The companies themselves, I mean, the deny, whatever the words that were on the bullets. I mean, that's true. The insurance companies are attempting. Look, they don't ever want to pay.
No,
or they want to pay less. And in many cases, your healthcare in the United States is not decided by need, and it's not decided by, reasonable expectation of care. It's decided by money. It's decided by rules, how they can skip and get out of things, circumvent things, deny things. They've got more money to fight you. So oftentimes, most people don't have the means or the assets to fight these big organizations. So, when the insurance company decides, hey, we're going to pull the plug on Joni over here, and, there may be a way around it, or there may be different solutions. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. They're going to pull the plug. She's going to drop dead.
And
as you just said, they're going to murder somebody.
A lot of times, the average person doesn't even know that there was something available to keep their. My daughter is a prime example. I'll keep it real brief, but we were taking a trip on the coast, and there's a hospital right there on the coast in Oregon. And my daughter had a bout. I won't get into what her medical situation is, but they were not capable of. They didn't have the facilities to take care of my daughter. Bottom line. Right. And they had to fly my daughter all the way to Seattle to Children's Hospital. And a few weeks later, she was fine and she lived. But had we not had the particular level of insurance that we had, they told us they wouldn't have even mentioned a plane and flying. Right. And they would have medicated her until she died there at the facility. Mm-hmm. Unless we were able to figure out some kind of way to physically move her or whatever. Our insurance they actually gave us a choice. We could have went to Oregon University, so they even gave us a choice of where to fly to. Mm-hmm. My point is, most people would have never even known that they can fly you somewhere else or anything like that, let alone it being offered to you. Mm-hmm. And so there are people who die that don't even know that there was an option out there for them. And it's because of the insurance company.
Well, and not for nothing, there's a lot of people that forget about insurance for a second that don't even have insurance in the first place. Yeah. And because the insurance companies basically collude with the hospitals and the healthcare system, those people are even more on the outside. And I mean, at the end of the day, they've got zero chance.
Yeah, I've interacted because of my daughter with hospitals and medical a lot. And one thing that I learned quickly was you take your daughter into the hospital. The first thing is they take you to the triage. The triage is not really to figure out your vitals and everything.
Mm.
It's basically to keep you keep them from accepting you into the hospital until they see what your insurance is and what level insurance and what they'll do and what they won't do for you.
Well, that's the first thing you do when you go into an emergency room. We've all been in the emergency room. They're basically the first thing they assess is your ability to pay.
Yes.
They're assessing that faster than they're assessing anything else. I mean, not to get into it, but you and I went to the emergency room
that's right.
Colorado. And, the first thing they were doing was assessing me for my ability to pay.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You spend more. If you spend 20 minutes in the waiting room or the 20 minutes in the check-in, I guarantee you more than half of that has to do with financial and signing forms, and less than half of that has to do with assessing what the hell's wrong with you.
110% agree with you, bro.
Oh, yeah. No, there's no question.
Here's my question. This is really all I want to talk about as far as this healthcare thing. They've caught him, right? So here's my question. And you talked about the comments and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will the shooter be found guilty by a jury of his peers? And secondarily, who will be considered his peers? Because we talked about the demographic he grew up in, and we've talked about the commentary of the majority of people. So my first question is, do you think the shooter will be found guilty by a jury of his peers?
Hard to say. I mean, I'm assuming that he's going to be tried in New York because that's where it happened. So by that, by definition, it's not his peers, right? Because he's not from that area and he's not from that economic level, more than likely. Yes. Do I think he's going to be found guilty? I can't. Well, who knows? I can't imagine they find him not guilty only because he was so poor in his. They've got so much evidence; it's not even funny. Right? I mean, he did it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's zero question. They got everything from fingerprints to bullets to video to. I mean, they got everything.
So you think that they can find 12 jurors?
I don't know about that.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I
12 jurors in New York City that didn't get screwed over by the insurance company? I doubt that.
And that's why my secondary question was, who will be considered his peers? They're extraditing him, or they're in the process of attempting to extradite him to Manhattan. I'm sure that'll happen in a week or two. And the demographic of the poorest person in Manhattan is a rich person.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in Manhattan for sure. Yeah. Yep. I don't know how it works though. I think Phil, in the city there, I think it's I don't know if it's Manhattan or it's the entire all the boroughs of New York. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if how that works.
I don't know for a fact either, but it seemed like that would be just a hard to shuffle that paperwork around. It would be better to keep the boroughs separate. And they do have their own separate governments in those boroughs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. I'll leave it at this. And I'm not a pro insurance guy here by any stretch of the imagination, nor am I think that the system is working. I was extremely, to bring it back to, since we're on an Overland podcast, to bring it back to the Overland nomad community, I was a little disappointed, to be honest, in the nomad community as a whole with some of the comments that I saw online. I'm not going to name names. And by the way, some of these people that were let's just call it the way it is, right? Anti-wealthy, anti-establishment, anti-the big man, anti-whatever you want to call it.
I agree.
some of these people are not what I would consider to be responsible people in the first place. They don't, half of these freaking nomads we're talking about don't have insurance.
We need to talk about that. That needs to be a podcast.
Yeah, I mean,
continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you're right. But on the other side of this, some of these people are just a bunch of, ding dongs as it is. They're not. Look, you can bitch about the system all you want, but stop bitching for a second and maybe try to improve it or try to help out to improve it. And by doing dumb things isn't not necessarily the way of solving the problem. But some of the comments I saw from some people that I actually personally know were like, really? Yeah, like you're like cool with that? Like, that's great. Like, let's make jokes about, some poor guy getting shot. I don't know. It was ugly. Let's just say I found it to be ugly. It was something that you just want to hit the turn off button on and be like, I don't even want to hear what this person has to say.
Well, Mike, I talked to a lot of these same travelers, and you're right. There is a lot of anti-establishment people, but there are also a lot of people that you talk to them and you get into the details of their life, and the whole reason why they're able to travel and they're not somewhere working is because of some kind of medical issue, some kind of settlement or whatever. So you actually have a section of people who have a lot of interaction with medical and have had bad things happen to them.
Yep.
Matter of fact, there's some people who have had medical settlements that I've met.
Yep.
I almost said his name.
For sure.
Golly.
We don't mention names on here unless we want to.
No, especially not that. But because I know someone who they're on like a medical thing for their back. They got a large settlement.
Yep.
And every time we talk, at some point in our conversation, we could be talking about anything. It always comes back to his back and what he went through.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of people who have been through a lot. All my interactions in the hospital is me taking somebody else to a hospital. I've never had to be in a hospital. I've broken all my fingers from playing football and then broke my ankle, and that's about it.
Yeah. And let's keep it down.
Yeah. So I don't have this lust for blood like others, but the basic principle of the man stomping on you your entire life, and then there's this one thing that happens that seems like to go in your favor, that is just, it's a natural response.
And that's what I expected out of this killer. And, that's what I assumed was going to be the case, but it doesn't really sound like that's the case. Unless we're not getting all the information. Like you said, he did have a back problem. Yeah, I don't know if it comes from that or not, but I guess we're going to see.
And usually if you're taking, because I had a hip injury, you take some of the same drugs, and you have to be very careful with them. So he may even have a drug problem.
Yep.
I had to literally just deal with the pain because I didn't want to get addicted to anything.
Yep. Understand. Yeah. Yep. So all right, that was our healthcare thing.
But let's end it. Give me a yay or a nay. Will the shooter be found guilty by a jury of his peers? This is our early prediction.
Early prediction. I think he's going to be found guilty. I don't know who they're going to get on the jury. Well, first of all, I don't know how the system works. I don't even know if it has to be a jury.
It's a murder.
I mean, it could be. Probably, right?
The only person who can make that decision is him and his legal team. Right. The judge can't take that right from you.
No. But I could decide to do it by a judge.
If it was a civil, they could do it. They can't. It's a murder.
Yeah. So it can't be. No judge.
Right. Yeah, because if that was the case, they'd go right for that. And I'm glad they can't, because I'm always thinking about what if I was ever
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
What do you think?
I think that this is going to be like the O.J. Simpson trial. It's going to be long. I believe he's going to have some of the best lawyers you've ever seen. Either his family's going to pay for it or they're going to volunteer. I believe this is going to be like one of the, this is going to be the first big case of the 21st century, one that's going to be on television that people are going to be running home to watch. And I think that, I don't know if you watched the OJ trial, but the majority of it wasn't the actual trial. They'd send out the juror, and the majority of the dialogue was just the judge and the.
Yeah.
I believe there's going to be a lot of that. I believe there's going to be a lot of claims of jury tampering, things like that. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on. I believe you're going to, like, more than once, you're going to hear about an argument or a fight amongst jurors, a juror being kicked out, one of the extra jurors being added in. I believe you're going to hear all of that kind of stuff. And in the end, to the answer to the question, I believe it's going to be a hung jury.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. I could see that happening, Phil, though. I wouldn't go against Phil's predictions, by the way, based on how he's been lately.
He's not going to get 12. I still want to.
Yeah, there's going to be somebody. It's going to be a hung jury because somebody's going to be a holdout. Is what you're saying?
I think he may get 3 or 4, but he ain't going to get 12. But all he needs is 1.
That's right. We need 1.
And I don't think it's going to be hard for him to get 1. I believe that there are actually, and that's another reason why I think it's going to be a big issue about the jurors, because I believe that there are actually going to be people who are going to strategically try to get themselves on there to get him off.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to hear, like, in the middle of it, you're like, we just found out that Michael LADDEN, juror number 2, has been on social media and blah, blah, blah. And that's what I think.
Yep. 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 You put it that way. I believe that. I'll buy into that.
So let's get into some Overlanding, Mike, because I want your answer to a question that I've already answered for my neighbor.
Okay.
I got a neighbor that's going to get on Instagram. He just retired. He's getting a vehicle. And he asked me about camera recommendations.
Mm-hmm. And
I've already given him his camera recommendation. Okay. But I wanted to open this up and just make it a general question to you. And that is, if someone were to come to you and say, hey, I'm coming close to retirement, or, I have more availability now to travel, and I'm going to start an Instagram account, but I don't want to be like you guys with all those big cameras and everything. I don't want to spend a lot, but I don't have a budget. I want good stuff. Recommend to me a good camera setup for me to travel for the next 2 years.
So I've talked
anything
about
but
this.
A DSLR.
Yep. I've talked about this on my own YouTube channel. I got a video out there about all my camera gear that I use currently today. I put out a couple months ago. I would say if you gave me a choice, I had to pick 2 items, 2 quote travel cameras that are going to do pictures and video. And you want to largely focus on Instagram or TikTok or even YouTube for that matter, but social media in general. So you're not trying to film, feature movies, and you're not trying to win the photography award, whatever. To be completely point blank and honest, and this is forget about budget. I'm going to go with your theory here. Budget doesn't matter, but I would say the 2 things that I would carry is, number 1, your cell phone. Whether or not you're on the Android system or you're on the Apple system. I happen to be on Apple. I would carry an iPhone. I would get one of the newer ones, an iPhone 15 or 16 that has, quite frankly, incredible video and is obviously, is easily edited. It shoots 4K. blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on. The second piece of equipment, for those of you that might be watching this podcast on YouTube, I'm actually looking at it right now because it is my camera on that's shooting the video for this podcast, is the DJI Osmo, Pocket Osmo. It is a little, call it 3 or 4 inches tall. It has a little camera on the top. You know what it looks like? It looks like it looks a little bit like, to me, it looks like ET. So it's got the little head at the top with the camera, but it's a built-in gimbal. So the stability while you're filming is fantastic. It's super small. It is fairly inexpensive. I think the creator package of the Osmo, Pocket Osmo, is like, I don't know, maybe $500 or $600. So it's not super expensive, but the picture quality is amazing. And it's tiny. So, you could stick it. The reason it's called a Pocket Osmo is because it fits in your pocket. So the 2 cameras I just told you, one's your iPhone or your smartphone, which you're going to need anyways for other things like email and talking on the phone and texting people. So it's a camera. And this DJI Osmo. If you gave me 2 things, that's what I would get.
Okay, Mike.
And I've got 2 YouTube videos right now that are coming out in the next couple of weeks. One talking about my tire drama that I've had on my truck, and the other one, a friend of mine, Bert, and I went around in town here in Todos Santos and did some filming. We're going to bring this to you guys, and we shot it entirely with phones and the Osmo.
Mike, our recommendations are eerily similar. I told him to get an iPhone and a DJI Osmo Action Pro. Mm-hmm. But I absolutely agree with the 3 that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. There's
an Action Pro, for those aren't aware, is similar to a GoPro. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And matter of fact, detailed, I said get an iPhone 16 Pro, a DJI Osmo Action Pro 5, and in addition, I said to get a DJI mic transmitter.
Yep.
And the reason why is because you're on the DJI, you're on the iPhone. You don't even have to buy their full audio kit. You can just buy one of their little mics for like $70 or $100, depending upon which one you get.
And if you get
it'll go directly to the iPhone, and it'll go directly to your DJI, and it'll go directly to the DJI Action Pro.
That's right.
So you've got studio quality sound. And how much is this? This is all under $1,000, right?
Well, I'm going to tell you that. So if you buy the Osmo, the Pocket Osmo, the microphone comes with it. It's in the creator package. Mm-hmm. So, and what Phil says is probably more important than video is audio. I can't tell you how. There are times I'll turn on YouTube, even if it's a how-to video, and it might be shot with a great camera and the picture's great and the audio is crap. I'm moving on to the next video. There's no way I'm listening to something that has shitty audio.
Well, anybody go to any film school in the world, the thing they're going to hit home with you more than anything is the audio. Mm-hmm. It's a scientific fact.
Exactly.
That audio, if there's not good audio, a person's natural knee-jerk reaction is no.
Yep. And I'm just like everybody else. No way.
So it's blowing me away, Mike. We on the same page. We were like really on the same page.
So you heard it here first. I mean, the key, particularly when I'm going to tell you, like, this is my theory on life, but it definitely applies to both the world of overlanding and the world of video and camera gear. The easier it is to use, the better chance that you're going to use it. If it's too much of a challenge to either set up or take down, or to get ready to go, or to haul around, you're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So keep it simple, stupid is the theory here. The smaller, the lighter weight, the easier it is. You could stick it in a pocket. The better chance you're going to actually film something. So, I've got DSLRs. and, big camera gear and stuff. And, am I gonna load that up in a bag, take it downtown here? I'm in Todos Santos, go film, I don't know, shopping at a little local Mexican grocery store. Am I hauling that big ass camera in there and making a big scene because everybody's looking at me like I just came from CNN, and then and two, set it up and just carry? No, I can walk into that place with my Osmo here in my pocket. Nobody would even know I'm filming, and get it done way faster, way easier, and not have to carry a bag, and I can still grocery shop, quite frankly. So the reality is the easier it is to use, the better chance you're actually going to do it. And by the way, when it comes down to it, people ask me all the time, how can I become Instagrammers? How can I become a YouTuber? What? And the number one thing is you got to do it. So the easier it is to do, the better chance you're going to have of succeeding.
And generally people post on social media chronologically.
Yep. Generally. I don't, right. But generally people do.
It's hard to do that with a DSLR because you got to download the stuff to something to send it. With the things that we just said, even when you're using the Action Pro and the other one, you have a copy that you can send to your phone and you can use that right away for social media, and it's great quality.
Yep.
So it's also a time thing. Sometimes, let's say you're on a cross-country road trip or you're somewhere internationally and you see something and it's a time-sensitive post. Well, you can't send out that post, or it's a waste of time taking that video or picture because you got to get back to your rig, open up your laptop and do all that stuff. And all I got to do is go, bang.
Yeah, hit it because it's already on your phone.
Right.
Exactly. Because the device that you recorded on is also your internet device. So, I mean, that's one of the main reasons, particularly for Instagram or TikTok, the phone is leaps and bounds number one because it's also your internet device.
Yes. And it'll probably be your only internet device in a lot of situations, even if you got Starlink or whatever. Sometimes you're somewhere, you're just in a quick bar or a library or whatever, quick Wi-Fi, or using somebody else's Starlink or whatever. The phone allows you to be truly mobile. Yeah.
Agreed.
And the quality now.
And by the way, we're gonna have a whole podcast on this, Phil, because I'm involved in a panel at Overland Expo called it's basically a creator panel, and we assemble a group of people that are YouTubers or social media people, and we talk about this because there's a lot of people out there that are interested in how do you do it, or how can I possibly get involved in this. So that's worth a podcast, just talking about it for a whole podcast.
So what else you got, Mike?
Well, I want to talk about a major world event that's occurring, and I don't think Americans understand how major it is and how much it relates to our world of overlanding. And that is this week that the country of Syria finally, and I say finally because it's basically the government of Assad has collapsed after almost 13 years since the quote Arab Spring, which is when it should have collapsed in the first place. And I'm using these words on purpose because this is my point why it affects the entire world. But I could tell you, as somebody that has traveled in Syria and Lebanon and Israel and Saudi Arabia, I've been through all of those countries and all of that area around there. This is huge news. It affects the Russian Ukraine war. It affects the Israel situation with Lebanon and Gaza. It affects Africa, places as far away as Central African Republic, Cameroon, places that Russia was using their military bases in Syria to fly stuff into Africa. It affects I mean, holy hell, is it going to affect foreign policy from the Trump administration coming in? And as a greater thing, and this is probably a whole nother conversation too, world travel, which is, near and dear to me and a lot of people that are listening to our podcast. World travel, in my opinion, and this is off subject now. This is more than Syria, but I think this is the absolute worst time in my 35 years or plus or minus of traveling. This is the absolute worst time that I've ever seen to accomplish world travel. Is right now. Expound on that, today. Mike. I know. Well, as somebody that set out 5 years ago to drive around the world, since I started 5 years ago, the Russia-Ukraine war started up, effectively eliminating the path from Europe to Asia. The Middle East has blown up, effectively eliminating the second path out of Africa into Europe. Some of you, I'm sitting down here in Mexico. We've had the border situation with the United States degrade to a point at which, and then we've now compiled that with taking out a couple cartel people. They've successfully made it much more difficult to bypass or travel through mainland Mexico. Has become much less stable than it was even 6 months ago because of the cartel situation and the trafficking and whatnot that have occurred over the last 5 years. Countries like Ecuador that used to be stable, super stable. I mean, I've been to Ecuador as well. Are almost no-go situations where it's become a more of a dangerous scenario. We've had shit blow up in central Honduras and Guatemala are sketchy. So transit from North America to South America. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. And there's stuff that's going on in Africa because of the Russian situation and the Wagner Group coming into various parts of Africa have made it more difficult to transit north to south or south to north. So these are all interconnected things. And some of this is coming from what I would call a mindset of all of this is happening behind the scenes. It is basically right now what we're really seeing on the surface is a scramble between the United States, Russia, China, India, various players for control of the world. And that's what's going on. That's just literally going on. And most of this we're fighting with proxy battles, right? So I'll give you an example. Syria collapses, and when I say minutes, that's an exaggeration. It was probably within seconds. Within seconds of people finding out that the rebel group was moving into Damascus, Israel started bombing hundreds, if not thousands of targets inside of Syria, as did the United States, by the way. And contrary to what you guys heard during the last election, where people were talking about, how U.S. doesn't have troops and all this stuff. I mean, we have a freaking military base in Syria with troops that also became engaged and started shooting and bombing various places in Syria as well. And the Israelis now have sent troops in, went right through the Golan Heights. For those of you that are familiar with the area, that's the border between Syria and Israel and Lebanon in the southwest corner. They've gone right out. They've actually now are taking over parts of Syria as we speak. So if you don't think it's a land grab, Israel's looking at this. I mean, the whole reason that Syria fell is because Israel, supported by the U.S., bombed the living shit out of Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Hamas, and Iran, and the U.S. set up a war. I mean, I'm just saying it the way it is. The U.S. set up a war with Russia in Ukraine, and we've basically smashed Russia. It was our most successful military operation the United States has ever done in the history of America, is the Ukraine-Russian war. And the reason for that is because we've single-handedly destroyed Russia. So all of a sudden, these rebels in Syria go, shit, Russia's not a player.
Mhm.
Iran's not a player. Israel is over here, and they're bombing everybody. I think it's time for us to walk in here. And they did. They literally walked in, took over the entire country in 4 days, and it's over. And that was 13 years in the making. But if you don't think that has further implications to travel, because first of all, we don't know what's going to come out of Syria at this point. I mean, you could paint this picture anyway. I like actually. Let's take a playbook out of the Russians. The Russians originally said that these were war criminals, and then as they started expanding across the country, they called them rebels. And now today they're calling them possible. Welcome. Yeah. So, this is how it works. I mean, but you can summarize it and call these new people that have taken over Syria whatever you want, but it's Al Qaeda. That's where they came from. That's the group that they were from. So if you think that these guys somehow are liberating Syria to make it a dictator-free country, you need to get out more, maybe go somewhere other than the local grocery store, because that's not what's happening right now. And we've had a failed policy. In my opinion, the two biggest things the U.S. ever did wrong in the last 20 years was to take out Saddam Hussein and to take out Muammar Gaddafi, because those two countries, Iraq and Libya, are complete and total disasters. And I transited at Northern Africa when I came from Morocco over to Egypt. And I went through Libya. I was under Gaddafi, and the country was passable. And quite honestly, it was actually stable, and the people were friendly. You couldn't drive your truck right now through Libya from one side or the other if your life depended on it. So there's another example of a place that's been shut down to travel. So, here's another example, by the way. Oh, and by the way, the reason that Assad just fell in Syria is because the Americans took out Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein, because that's what created the Arab Spring, which just happened to take 13 years in Syria. And the only reason it took that long is because Russia and Iran held them up for all this time.
And here we don't seem to understand that we're the hand inside the puppet to all of this. Those countries absolutely know. And
yeah.
So you were talking about the safety of traveling. About the ability to travel there. It's the safety more than anything in my eyes. You are the enemy as an American going to any of these countries. You have caused unrest, devastation, death. And you may not have done it yourself, but you were complicit in the action of others to get these things done. So that's a disheartening thing as a traveler if you want to go to these places knowing that there's an additional fear factor because of some of the things America has done to that particular country.
Yeah, and it's not even just the Americans. I mean, it's obviously led by us, but it also has to do with, the British, the Australians, the Germans, the French. Everybody has some involvement in this. Shit, on the other side, the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, we're all, and that's my point. We're all fighting for world domination. I mean, let's just cut to the chase. And resources,
because this specifically, the rules is borders and religion and history and all of that, but it's resources.
Yep. So, and it's interesting how we all work side by side with one another, because let's take Syria as a good example of this. The Russians have a air base and they have a sea base in that country. Both of them are on the Caribbean side, or the Caribbean. Oh boy, Mike. They're both on the water side of Syria, and the Americans, we have a base on the Iraq side, And by the way, these aren't new. These have existed now for years. We've all been inside the country. And the Israelis have been inside as well because they've been stationed in the Golan Heights since the late 60s. So, and by the way, and in northern Syria, the Turkish army has been inside of Syria. So all of these, what do you want to call us? Outsiders or conquerors, basically, have been inside Syria together, not on the same team, and all accepting of each other. Look, this rebel group that just swept through the country, do you think they tried to take the territory from the Americans next to the Iraqi border? Fuck no. No, they're not taking that. Do you think that those guys are trying to fight the Israelis in southern Syria? Hell no. In fact, they left the Russians with their bases over there as well. They're not touching any of that.
Mike, I think that America has their hand on both sides of this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because trust me, if the U.S. didn't want to recognize this new Syrian government, they wouldn't. It wouldn't have been this fast. So there had to have been some talks and some interactions for us to do it that fast.
Yeah, behind the scenes, there's a lot going on. And then the other thing, here's my bigger concern, and this is a huge concern for all of you guys out there that want to do world travel. I think the real problem here that you're going to see come in the next year is Turkey, because there's a lot of support going on. And by the way, much of Syria is now controlled basically by Turkey. And Turkey, if you recall, wants to basically eliminate the Kurds. So this is your next genocidal area where they have enough power now that they're going to be able to just start wiping people out. And Turkey, you want to know what the biggest problem with Turkey is? Turkey is a NATO country, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's in the UN. Mm-hmm. I mean, so here we are. And you know who Turkey hates? Israel. So talk about playing both sides. We're going to have two countries that are, quote, our allies. They're going to fight because now they're bordering each other because Syria just fell. So now you effectively have Turkey and Israel now are bordering one another. They're going to fight. I'm going to tell you that right now. And Turkey is going to destabilize most of Eastern Europe. That's what's going to happen. If you think Ukraine is a big problem, Turkey is a bigger problem. So mark my words. You want predictions on the podcast? Watch Turkey. It's a big problem because that guy's crazy. He's just as crazy as Putin is.
Okay.
That's a dictatorship. It's another country with a dictatorship. So, I see that as a big problem. So the Syria thing to me, Americans are not super interested in the. I don't think if you ask 9 out of 10 people on the street, they don't know where Syria is. They don't really give a crap. And they don't really think that the fact that Assad, who his family has ruled for over 50 years, just fell. If you don't think that's a big deal, it's a huge deal. Huge deal.
I agree, bro. I'm one of them people who I understand the importance of it, but it's a secondary thought to me because there's always something going on over there. And
yep. But it was for a long time. Think of it this way. Syria was like the kind of like the, what's that thing you have above a door, where you got all the rocks that go around, and the keystone. It was like the keystone. It was holding the whole shit together because you had Iraq and Lebanon and, all these countries around it that are not stable or hated each other, Iran. And it was kind of the thing that was in the middle, holding it sort of together. You've taken out this piece that's in the middle now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, because the guys that just took over aren't very strong, right? So the rebels that just took the whole country, even though they did it in 4 days, they don't really have assets. They don't have strength. They don't have any of these things. And by the way, since they took over, with the U.S. and Israel bombing the shit out of everything, we basically took away everything that Syria had under the prior regime in a way of equipment or bases or aircraft or airports or chemical weapons or weapons of any kind. We just bombed the shit out of. So now they don't have nothing. So now you're talking about, like, you're looking at Syria's turned into like Afghanistan. It's got nothing. It's a barren wasteland of shit. And by the way, Damascus is a beautiful city. It's like one of the oldest cities, if not the oldest city in the world, and it's huge. So you've got a lot of people there too. So this could also turn into a humanitarian problem.
All right, what's next, bro?
Well, I think that leads into just what I mentioned earlier, which I'd like to talk about on a podcast. But I'd like to get some guests on here and talk about overland travel outside of the United States. I think we spend a lot of time as Americans talking about it in the States, but I do think that there's a lot of people that aspire to travel internationally. And you know, it's funny where I am here in Baja. We get to see a lot of particularly Europeans come by that have shipped their trucks from Europe, usually into Canada, and then have made their way down here, and they're going to do the Pan American, et cetera, et cetera. I will tell you, so far this year, there are less of them than I've seen in past years. And there definitely is a bigger concern with once they leave Baja and start making their way down the Pan American. So I find that it's a microcosm of all, obviously, of the whole international travel worldwide, but it's indicative of what I think you might be seeing in other continents as well. But if that's the going thing where people are starting to discuss the feasibility of long-term overland travel, it's an interesting new development. So, you know, I mean, we talk about this at Overland Expo a lot. You know, there's a lot of classes there that are talking about, you know, different regions, Africa, South America. You know, the world is a big place. There's beautiful things everywhere. The question now is, what is accessibility going to look like? And you and I talk about this in the podcast a lot, you know, the economics of it as quote Americans. You know, obviously the economy is some of that may be economy based. There's less people traveling. You know, I see it.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. That's all we ever talk about is the economy, bro. Everything costs more. Mm-hmm. So there are people who literally maybe 2-4 years ago, they had a budget and they had these 4 or 5 trips planned over the next 10 years. Well, with the increase in our economy, expenses, inflation, and all of that, people are like having to cut out some of those trips and reassess their plans and things like that. There are people who are holding on to vehicles a little bit longer, making do with vehicles, all kinds of stuff. The world of travel has changed significantly, I'd say, in the last 2 years.
And one of the, you know, this is probably also a discussion for another podcast, but one of the things I'm starting to see, which is a little sad, I'm starting to see the percentage, because you and I have talked at length about and this is something else we can talk about again, but the definition of an overlander or the definition of a nomad or definition of a traveler and where they come from and what mindset it is and who they are and whatnot. But what I've seen shifting a little bit is it would appear that the overlander is becoming more frequently somebody that has more money and assets. In other words, what I'm seeing is that for several years now, it was a big cross section of people. And what I'm seeing is there's less and less of the people doing it on tighter budgets, and more percentage of the people more affluent.
I think it was
And
always affluent, and there was a short little moment where a lot of people were able to jump on board because of an infusion in funds during COVID.
mhm.
There
Yep.
were a lot of people who all of a sudden had time and a few $1,000s in their pocket, and they were able to do it. And that time has come and gone. And
Yeah.
it has always been an affluent thing. It came from affluence.
Well, I mean, I will tell you that, in my opinion, the nomad community right now is shrinking. For the last couple of years, it had been going up. It was getting more and more people were nomads. We talked about this before. Different places in the country were concerned with how many van lifers there were and what's going to happen when there were more and more people deciding they want to park in downtown Bend, Oregon, or whatever. That has passed. I'm going to tell you right now, the number of people that are nomads and full timers and overlanders is dropping. It's going down right now.
Well, people can go back 2 years ago, the podcast that we had, and that was a prediction I made early on. I said in about 2 years, you're going to see a bunch of these vans and vehicles up for sale, people back at home working. It was impossible for this thing to keep going in that direction without the support of the economy.
And there's your soundbite for the podcast, folks. The world of overlanding right now is shrinking. There are less and less nomads, and quite frankly, I don't see that changing for the near future. I think we're going to continue to lose the overland and nomadic lifestyle right now.
So, what's your personal feeling about it? Does it
I think
hurt
it's
your
like everything else.
soul? Are you happy about it? You don't care?
I think it's cyclical. I think that it was time. I think in no matter what business or what thing you're talking about in life, there's contraction and there's expansion. And I think the overland market as a whole and the overland community as a whole was expanding and at times incredibly quickly over the last 10 years, particularly helped by the pandemic during those years. And right now, there's a massive contraction going on. I think it's actually speeding up. I think that there's less people. There's going to be less products. There's going to be less companies that are going to survive through that. And I think on top of that, I really think that, you see it right now, like as an example, I'll give you an example in the I'll call it the fringe, luxury goods markets, like motorcycles. KTM, the largest European motorcycle manufacturer, has declared bankruptcy. I heard rumors that Harley was in trouble. Ducati is in trouble. They can't sell a camper. Thor, one of the largest RV makers in the world, is in trouble. Like if you go to any lot in America right now, an RV lot or a motorcycle dealership or whatever, jet skis or trailers or you name it, you got your pick of the litter. There's shit everywhere because we can't sell this crap because mark my words, there's less people doing it. There's less people that have the money to buy it. They over manufactured all this stuff because they were so used to what was going on during COVID, where everybody was buying a Sprinter van. I mean, pretty soon you'll be able to buy a set up Sprinter van for 50 grand, down from 250 grand. I'm serious. If you have any wealth or assets right now, is a fantastic time to get into the market. But my opinion is there's just less and less of those people. And I really think that I think you're going to see that this coming season at Overland Expo. I predict that the attendance at Overland Expos is down. And I think it's going to be down a lot. It was down a little this year already.
I believe there's less and less overlanders. I agree with what you said, but I believe there were always fewer than what was projected.
Yep.
The majority of the people who were coming to attend these events and are watching all of the YouTube channels and supporting them and buying all of the gear are really just people who camp on the weekend.
Yep.
So at a certain point, this is way, way overkill. This is something that you can't explain to the wife or whatever. You're
exactly. It's going to return to, I'm going to get a tent, a sleeping bag, a green propane canister, and a little jet boil, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to camp for the weekend. There's no way you're selling to your wife that I need the $100,000 Jeep with a rooftop tent and all this other stuff. That market is in trouble, big trouble.
Mm-hmm. Because something that used to make me cringe that makes the point is, how often have you heard somebody say, well, I've been overlanding for 30 years. They just didn't call it that. They called it camping. Right. No, you wasn't doing it for 30 years. You're still not doing it. You were camping then, you're camping now. And we took that word and made it like for everybody. And that was kind of the mistake, because it changed everything for the industry, because now they were trying to sell overland stuff to campers, and it's been working, but ain't nobody got no money now.
Right. Yep. And let's be honest, a lot of people, I noticed this in the nomad community. A lot of people did it, particularly after the pandemic, where they, they could work remotely and whatnot. They don't like it. They found out it just wasn't for them. There was a lot of people that got into it that were like, damn, I don't really want to camp. I don't want to live in a van. I don't want to not know where I'm parking tonight.
If you don't know who I'm talking about, I'll tell you once we're offline. But like I know a couple who was like they were the symbol of couples traveling. Come to find out, they couldn't stand living in a tent traveling around.
Yeah.
So it's a difference between watching, and that's something we should talk about one day. People see the Instagram, they see the YouTube, and all you're seeing is the highlights. You're seeing the steak hitting the scuttle and going, you're seeing the beautiful sunset, and everybody's around the campfire, and you're not seeing it took you 30 minutes to put that tent up. And I could go on and on.
You're not. Yeah. Obviously, we've talked about that a lot too. Social media is not reality, right? And I think social media has done some damage to the overland / nomad community as well, because it portrayed it as something that it never was. It never was, Phil. It never was about you and I standing hand in hand, looking at the Grand Canyon with the beautiful sunset. I mean, that is part of travel. That is part of exploration, but that didn't describe how we got there, the stuff that we had to buy to get there, the road that we had to go on to get there, the laundry I had to go pick up at the laundromat so you could be ready. It doesn't describe any of this other crap. It just shows you the nice picture of the sunset over the Grand Canyon. And that was how I think overlanding was marketed.
Yeah.
And it's not the way it is.
And a majority of Americans do not have a nomadic. They're not nomads. They're not naturally a nomad. Most people, I think there's some stat like 70% of Americans never leave they never leave a 600-mile radius or something like that.
So today's podcast is famous today, I think, for me saying like potentially controversial things. I'm going to tell you one more today. Americans are the least nomadic of any country or any group of people from any country that I've ever met by far. It isn't even close. I can tell you, even just down here in Mexico, the vast majority of people that are not from Mexico that I run into are European or Canadian. I spent years traveling across Africa. I think I saw one American the entire time. You know, tons of French, tons of Germans, tons of whatever. Americans are absolutely not nomadic. So the fact that we have, quote, a van life craze or a nomadic community is almost a joke, because to say that there's a nomadic community in the United States is like saying, I don't know. I don't know what it's compared to, but like compared to Europe or compared to, you know, anywhere, that's a joke. Like if you were living in Australia all your life, and then somebody said, "Hey, yeah, there's a vibrant nomadic community in the United States. Go check it out." You'd get there and be like, "When the shit are they talking about?" Because it's not true.
I agree with you.
And I know I'm going to get attacked. I guarantee you, we get attacked by somebody and then say, "Oh, that's not true. It is what you make of it." Blah 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 blah. Look, I know hundreds, if not thousands, of nomads for sure. I mean, but it's a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of people that are in the United States, and it's a drop in the bucket compared to the percentage in other countries.
Mike, throughout my life, I have encountered people, and you've probably had the same experience, where through discussion, you discover that they haven't even been to certain sides of town, right, let alone travel. And that's not unusual.
No, it's not unusual. It's, you know, I grew up in New England, and I cannot tell you how many people I knew that had never been to Canada. And we literally lived 3.5, where I grew up, we lived 3.5 hours from Canada. You know, you could be in New England and live 15 minutes from Canada, but I couldn't believe the amount of people that had never been to Canada. Quite frankly, the amount of people that had never even left New England. It's insane. So
I agree.
We are not a nomadic. We are Americans, by and large, are not nomadic people. And the fact that after the pandemic, the explosion, I'll call it an explosion, of nomads and van lifers and overlanders comparatively grew exponentially. It did. There was way more people getting into it. And I'm telling you right now, it's imploding. It's going the opposite direction. And there's less and less people. But even at its height, it was nothing compared to other places in the world.
Agreed. Mike, is there anything else you want to say? We're running out of time.
Oh, I mean, we could rant for hours, but we just came up with about 10 other good podcasts.
There's something I got to say about everything that we talked about.
Yeah.
And like you just said, there's a couple of things we need to like dedicate time to. All right, guys. Well, you know what I'm going to say. Stay safe, tread lightly, and hopefully we'll see you here or on the trail soon.
You have been listening to Waypoint Overland's Random Waypoints. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.